Ja, also even maar we gaan het nog saus bunchen, dan is nog wel. Ja, leaders. Hervet, zeg we were the one on the if the ear smashed with their Guess what happened? I just saw a new movie. Not only that, but I saw it at a movie theater. Hello, everybody. I am out here at La Abra near the Regal Cinemas 16 to go see Tenet. This is the first time I've been in a theater since I think Onward. It's going to be an interesting experience for me. I'm curious what it's going to be like wearing a mask the whole time and sitting in a theater, if that's going to be any different. Also, I don't know, it's just going to be very interesting for me. So, I'll let you know what my thoughts are afterwards. So yes, I saw the film Tenet in theaters. I drove all the way to La Abra, which is a good 30 miles from where I live, to go see a movie in theaters. It was a very weird experience, and you know, the audience was respectful and small, so I didn't really have any issues in terms of like having a theater experience. No, however, knowing the trek it took me to get all the way out there to see the movie, I'm gonna be hesitant in saying that I'm probably gonna have to wait till this movie gets on demand before I see it again. But here we are talking about Tenet. So Tenet is a 2020 film directed by Christopher Nolan, starring John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, and Aaron Taylor Johnson, as it follows our main protagonist, played by John David Washington, as he is part of a new secret spy group called Tenet. He investigates and tries to stop a new threat that might end the world. Tenet is a very interesting film for me to analyze because I think I need to go over this film like a couple more times, at least see it one more time, because I definitely didn't absorb all of it initially on my first viewing. In fact, here were my first thoughts when I saw the film. So I just saw Tenet. It is a very interesting movie. My first thoughts were, I'm gonna need to see this movie again and with subtitles. Because the main thing that was kind of hard for me to experience was that the movie is really loud, and it seemed like a lot of the sound effects were getting in the middle of the dialogue, so I had a hard time comprehending a good amount of different exposition points, so certain things were getting confusing for me. First thoughts on the movie, I will say I really enjoy the technical aspect of the movie. I think that's kind of a given with Nolan. He really likes to, I guess the phrase is, push the boundary with filmmaking in general. So a lot of the reversed sequences I thought were initially just hard to wrap your brain around, but as the movie goes on, you kind of just watch it unfurl in front of you. There's a moment where one of the characters actually like experiences inversion, is what they call in the movie, for the first time. And that was probably my favorite moment in the movie. It's like we're experiencing it for the first time, and it's this whole new world that Nolan's like creating for us. That was really nice. There's a lot of action sequences in this movie, and some of them we actually get to see twice, different perspectives. So that actually was probably my favorite part. My favorite action sequence throughout the entire film has got to be the airport sequence. Just how they utilize every aspect of that scene. And it you go through it in one perspective initially, and then you go through it in another perspective. You just get a lot of enjoyment out of it. There's a lot of details involved in that. So that was really cool. I'm going to need to stew on this for a minute. I don't know if I can give a good explanation of my full thoughts yet, or maybe I'm gonna need a second screening before I can really get a good gist of this movie. My God. Yeah, so here's other Josh to give more detailed and in-depth explanation of past Josh's thoughts. Whoa, past and future. I feel like we're hitting on some themes here. After processing the film for a couple of days, I definitely believe that I still stand by some of my initial thoughts. What I really initially liked about the film was a lot of the technical aspects. I think it's safe to say that with Nolan behind the camera, he definitely puts in a lot of effort in trying to make the film not only look visually appealing, but try different techniques and styles to really make it a one-of-a-kind experience. For the effective inversion, a lot of what he did was playing the film in reverse, or having actors act and work in reverse to bring the effect to life, which I thought was a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication for a simple effect, and I thought it really paid off. I definitely was invested in how that effect worked, and I definitely enjoyed the moments where it was put into play. Acting wise, I think everyone did a very good job. The stand-up obviously is Robert Pattinson. He definitely has a charismatic character that is fun to watch and interact off with John David Washington. And I also really enjoyed Kenneth Branagh in his character and his acting for that character. He plays the main antagonist, and he definitely brings in a lot of hamminess and over-the-top nature to what he does. She is on the shelf right below me, by the way, my cat. You want to come in and say hi? All right. Hey, you want to stop? I'm going to take you out of there. I know. It's a new place for you to explore, but I can't right now. You're gonna, just for punishment, you're gonna be in front of this scene. Okay, I'll put you down. And of course, the action sequences themselves were really fun and inventive. I think my favorite action sequence throughout the entire film has to be the airport art heist scene. They utilize a lot of the inversion techniques, and there's a lot of practical work, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. So, here are the main gripes I have with Tenet. This may be a very cliched saying, but I think it actually has a lot of weight to what I'm talking about, in that this story doesn't have a lot of heart to it. It definitely feels like the movie is just a playground for this idea. That's kind of all it is. Unfortunately, a lot of the characters don't have a lot of personal reasons to get involved besides the fact that it's their job to. It's the end of the world. They gotta save the world. There's no personal stakes involved. And I think that kind of made it difficult for me to really get invested in the story in general. I really wanted to like a lot of what was going on, and a lot of the scenes blew me away, but it's really hard for me to care when I don't really have a full grasp of the characters and why I should care about them. John David Washington specifically kind of has a lot lacking in terms of character for me. I'm not saying that his portrayal and his acting was poor, but I feel like the main issue I had with him is that he had no personal stakes to get involved with this. He could have just been anybody picked off the streets or picked out of this agency to do it. There wasn't really anything specific about him that made it his story. You could give an argument into him being personally attached to Elizabeth Debicki's character and her relationship with her husband, and how he kind of feels sorry for her and feels empathy for her and tries to make things right for her, and that definitely helps enhance the story. But there really isn't anything about him specifically that I feel really makes it his story. To give an example, and I think a lot of people are going to be doing this too, is compare this to Inception. It's been a while since I saw Inception, but what I do remember of the movie is a lot of the main actors, Leonardo DiCaprio's personal investment. He wants to see his kids, and he also incepted his wife and feels a lot of guilt for that, and that also plays a lot into that story. So there's a reason why we're following him. For the protagonist of Tenet, it could have easily just been about Robert Pattinson's character Neil, and honestly it would have had the same story and the same effect on me. Maybe even a little bit more with Neil because of what happens to him later in the story. Another issue I have with Tenet is that it has a hard time getting across information, which is very surprising given the fact that a lot of the movie explores a lot of exposition around the rules. And there's no issue I have with exposition in general. You need to get the story out somehow, and you have to get me involved because I don't know what's going on, so I need somebody to tell me what's happening. The issue I have with Tenet is that there's always more rules being expounded upon, even as we near the end of the story. And that kind of makes it hard for me to get invested in the story in general if everything's being told at me. There are also a couple details specifically, I can get more into this later in spoilers, that are presented but are never executed. And it made me think for a minute why those details were brought up and what purpose they serve the story. And then some tinier nitpicks that I had with my experience was that the sound mixing really needed some work, or I needed subtitles, because there were just moments where sound effects were just blaring, or there were just music that was blaring, and I just could not hear what people were saying. A great example for me is when it's Kenneth Branagh, Elizabeth Debicki, and John David Washington are on a boat, and they're like doing some sailing stuff, and they're talking through headset microphones, and they're talking, but everything else around them is just overpowering their voices, and I have no idea what they're saying. There's also a scene where Kenneth Branagh is interrogating John David Washington. One of them is speaking in reverse. I think from what I remember, he's speaking in reverse, and then there's a delay as his normal voice is coming out to give the translated version of what he's saying, but it's all just garbled mess. And that makes it hard for me to get, again, I'm just going to say this a lot, it was hard for me to get invested based off those details. I'm going to get into some spoilers. This is the first time I ever really needed to do spoilers because, believe it or not, this is the first time on my channel I've actually discussed a movie that is still currently in theaters. So, if you want me to skip spoilers, here's a timestamp right here for when I stop. So, the main issues specifically that I was bringing up about the details were about like the rules of inversion and how that affects the story later on. There was a whole motivation bit about Kenneth Branagh and how his plan is going to end the world by how everything's going to be inversed. That detail was brought up, and that is apparently supposed to be climactic. That's supposed to end the world by causing massive inversion. Now, I'm sure they brought the details up, but I never visually got an understanding of how significant and how important it was for this moment not to happen. There wasn't a smaller scale version of like the damage it could cause, or there just was no negative downside I saw to inversion, besides the fact that you just go backwards in time. Made it kind of confusing when I didn't understand what the stakes were, especially because when you're playing with time, especially with the climax being so focused around the ending of the movie being around technically the middle of the movie, how am I gonna care about if it doesn't work or not if I know already that going forward continues smoothly? To give a better explanation, what I'm basically saying is that if I already know that there is a future where this moment didn't happen, then how do I know that these characters have any risk of losing? The time rules get very wobbly and very hard to understand. Again, I just might need to look at the film again and pay more closer attention to the rules of what's happening. But that section was just very hard for me to understand. Another smaller detail that I'm very confused why this was brought up if it never was fully executed was the idea that if you touch your inverted self, that all of a sudden you just disintegrate. And I thought, well, maybe that might come into play later. Maybe that will be the comeuppance for Kenneth Branagh. Neither of those things happen. The only time where a person touches their inverted self is when John David Washington fights himself in the airport. The thing is, I guess apparently because he was wearing a full body suit, he wasn't technically touching himself. But there was no visual understanding of what
the risk was for touching your inverted self. So these details are just thrown out, but I don't see any visual understanding of what the consequences are. So I guess this brings up the question, do I think Tenet is a bad movie? I don't think it's bad. I think it is a very well-made movie in terms of how it was technically put together. I just think story-wise, it needed work. I would like to see this concept put into other features in the future. I really like what they've done with it. They were fantastic action sequences and just sequences as a whole that were just really fun to watch, and I think it brought back to like film basics of just like trying to play around with what you have and what interesting things you can make out of it. Basically, Christopher Nolan made an entire movie surrounding the idea of just reversing footage. That's just such a fun idea to put a movie together. I honestly am just excited for whatever he puts out. Thank you for watching. If you have any other movies you suggest for me to watch, let me know down below. And also follow me on my social medias on Twitter and Instagram, links here. And you can also follow me on my Instagram hashtag Day in the Life of JRI, where I post daily. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time. Hello, welcome to another edition of Josh Wants to Talk About Movies. I'm talking backwards, which I'm sure is very original and no other reviewer has ever started like that.